Steve Harvey's teacher mocked his dream of being on television and called him smart-alecky. His father's response became the foundation of his success and proved that sometimes a parent's faith in their child's impossible dream is worth more than all the expert opinions in the world. It was October 1963, and sixth grader Steve Harvey sat in Mrs. Peterson's classroom at Glenville Elementary School in Cleveland, Ohio, struggling with an assignment that seemed simple for everyone else, but felt impossible for him. Mrs. Peterson had asked each student to write a paragraph about what they wanted to be when they grew up. But for Steve, who suffered from a severe stuttering problem, even thinking about his future felt overwhelming. At 11 years old, Steve was the kid that other children, and even some teachers, saw as different. His stutter was so severe that he often couldn't say his own name without getting stuck on the first letter. Simple tasks like reading aloud or answering questions in class were torture for him. Most people assumed that Steve's speech impediment was a sign of limited intelligence or that he would never amount to much in life. But Steve had a secret dream that he had never shared with anyone. Every evening after school, he would rush home to watch television. This was 1963, and television was still relatively new and magical. Steve would sit transfixed in front of their small black and white TV set, watching variety shows, comedy programs, and talk shows, dreaming of the day when he might be on the other side of that screen. "Someday I'm going to be on television," Steve would whisper to himself when no one was around. "Someday people are going to see me on that screen." It seemed like an impossible dream for a stuttering boy from a working-class family in Cleveland. But in Steve's mind, television represented something magical, a place where people could make others laugh, where personalities could shine, and where anything seemed possible. As Steve stared at the blank piece of paper on his desk, listening to his classmates easily discuss their plans to be teachers, firefighters, and nurses, he felt the familiar anxiety that came with having to express himself in words. But something inside him refused to write down a safe career choice. Taking a deep breath, Steve began to write in his careful handwriting. "When I grow up, I want to be on television. I want to make people laugh and be famous so that everyone will see me on TV." It was perhaps the most honest and vulnerable thing Steve had ever written. Despite his stutter, despite the way people looked at him when he struggled to speak, despite being told both directly and indirectly that he should lower his expectations, Steve had written down his biggest, most impossible dream. When Mrs. Peterson collected the papers the next day, Steve felt a mixture of excitement and terror. For the first time, he had shared his secret dream with someone, even if it was just on paper. 3 days later, Mrs. Peterson called Steve to her desk after class. "Steve, I need to talk to you about your assignment," she said, holding his paper with a disapproving expression. "Did I do something wrong, Mrs. Peterson?" "Steve, this assignment was supposed to be realistic. You wrote that you want to be on television and be famous." "Yes, ma'am." "Steve, you have a severe speech impediment. You can barely get through a sentence without stuttering. Don't you think it's a bit arrogant to think you could be on television?" Steve felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment and shame. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Peterson. I think you're being smart-alecky, young man. Television is for people who can speak properly, who are educated, and who have special talents. You need to be more realistic about your limitations." Mrs. Peterson rewrote Steve's assignment, changing his dream from being on television to working in a factory like your father. "There," she said, handing him the corrected paper. "That's more appropriate for someone with your challenges." But Mrs. Peterson wasn't finished. That afternoon, she called Steve's father, Jesse Harvey, to discuss what she saw as Steve's inappropriate behavior and unrealistic attitude. "Mr. Harvey, I'm calling about Steve's assignment. He wrote that he wants to be on television when he grows up, which I found to be quite smart-alecky and unrealistic given his speech problems." Jesse Harvey listened quietly as Mrs. Peterson continued. "I think Steve is developing an arrogant attitude, and I wanted you to know so you could address this at home." Children like Steve need to understand their limitations and be more realistic about their futures. Mrs. Peterson, Jesse Harvey said calmly, "What exactly did my son write?" "He wrote that he wants to be on television and be famous. It's quite inappropriate for a child with such severe speech difficulties." Jesse was quiet for a moment before responding. "Mrs. Peterson, let me ask you something. Do you think my son is intelligent?" "Well, yes, when he can manage to express himself." "And do you think he has a good heart?" "Yes. But Mr. Harvey, and do you think he works hard to overcome his speech problems?" "Yes, he tries. But then why?" Jesse Harvey said, his voice growing stronger. "Would you want to crush his dreams instead of encouraging them?" Mrs. Peterson was taken aback. "Mr. Harvey, I'm trying to help Steve be realistic." "No, ma'am. You're trying to make my son small. You're trying to make him believe that his speech problem defines what he can and cannot become. But I'm here to tell you that you're wrong." Jesse Harvey paused, choosing his words carefully. "Mrs. Peterson, my son has been fighting to find his voice his whole life. Every day, he struggles to say things that come easily to other children. But instead of that making him weak, it's made him strong. It's made him determined. And if my son says he wants to be on television someday, then I believe him. But Mr. Harvey, be realistic." "I am being realistic. I'm being realistic about who my son is, not just his stutter, but his heart, his intelligence, and his determination. And if you can't see those things, then maybe the problem isn't with Steve's dreams. Maybe the problem is with your vision." When Steve came home from school that day, he expected to be in trouble. He had heard other kids talk about teachers calling their parents, and it usually meant punishment and lectures about behavior. But instead, Jesse Harvey sat down with his son and had a conversation that would shape Steve's entire life. "Steve, your teacher called me today about your assignment." Steve's heart sank. "I'm sorry, Dad. I shouldn't have written about being on television." "Why not?" Steve looked confused. "Because Mrs. Peterson said it was smart-alecky, and that I can't be on TV because I stutter." Jesse Harvey looked at his 11-year-old son with the kind of love and intensity that would be burned into Steve's memory forever. "Steve, let me tell you something, and I want you to never forget it. Your stutter doesn't define what you can become. It doesn't limit your dreams. It doesn't make you less than anyone else." Steve stared at his father, hardly believing what he was hearing. "But Dad, I can barely talk sometimes." "Son, I've watched you your whole life. I've seen you struggle with words, yes, but I've also seen your heart, your humor, and your determination. And if you want to be on television someday, then that's what we're going to work toward." Jesse Harvey pulled out Steve's original assignment, which Mrs. Peterson had given him to take home. "Steve, I want you to keep this paper. I want you to keep it and look at it whenever someone tells you that your dreams are too big or too impossible. You really think I could be on television someday?" "Steve, I don't just think it, I believe it. But more importantly, you need to believe it. Don't you ever let anyone make you smaller than God made you to be." That night, Jesse Harvey helped Steve practice speaking clearly, working with him on breathing techniques and encouraging him to speak slowly and deliberately. But more than the technical help, Jesse gave Steve something infinitely more valuable: the belief that his dreams were valid and achievable. "Steve," Jesse said, as they finished their practice session, "Mrs. Peterson sees your stutter and thinks that's all there is to you. But I see my son, who has been fighting to find his voice since he was little, and I know that when you finally find it, the whole world is going to listen." Over the years that followed, whenever Steve faced rejection, criticism, or moments of self-doubt, he would remember that conversation with his father. When other people told him that comedy was unrealistic, when teachers continued to discourage his dreams, when early audiences didn't laugh at his jokes, Steve held on to his father's belief like a lifeline. Jesse Harvey never wavered in his support of Steve's seemingly impossible dream. When Steve struggled through high school, still battling his stutter but determined to perform, Jesse was in the audience for every school play and talent show. When Steve decided to pursue comedy professionally in the 1980s, Leaving behind stable employment for the uncertain world of entertainment, Jesse supported his decision even when other family members thought Steve was making a mistake. "That boy's going to be on television someday," Jesse would tell anyone who questioned Steve's career choice. "Mark my words." The vindication of Jesse Harvey's faith came gradually. Then all at once. Steve's comedy career slowly gained momentum throughout the 1980s and early 1990s. But the real breakthrough came in 1996 when Steve was offered his own television sitcom, The Steve Harvey Show. On the night of the show's premiere, Steve called his father. "Dad, do you remember that assignment I wrote in 6th grade? The one Mrs. Peterson said was smart-alecky?" "Of course I remember. Dad, turn on your TV. Your son is about to be on television." Jesse Harvey sat in his living room that night, watching his son host his own television show, thinking back to that 11-year-old boy with the big dreams and the severe stutter who had been told by his teacher that he was being unrealistic. "I told you so," Jesse whispered to the TV screen, tears streaming down his face. The success of The Steve Harvey Show was just the beginning. Steve went on to host Family Feud, his own daytime talk show, and multiple other television programs, becoming one of the most recognizable faces on television. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came in 2017 when Steve returned to Glenville Elementary School to speak to students about pursuing their dreams despite obstacles. 44 years ago, I sat in a classroom in this school and wrote that I wanted to be on television, Steve told the assembled students. "My teacher told me I was being smart-alecky and unrealistic. She said that someone who stuttered like I did could never be on TV." Steve paused, looking at the faces of the children in the audience. "But my father told me something different. He told me that my dreams were valid, that my stutter didn't define my limitations, and that if I believed in myself and worked hard, anything was possible." Kids, there are going to be people in your life who try to make your dreams smaller. They're going to tell you to be realistic, to lower your expectations, to accept limitations that other people want to put on you. But I want you to remember something. Those people don't get to decide what you can become. Only you and God get to decide that. Steve pulled out a faded piece of paper, his original 6th grade assignment that his father had encouraged him to keep. "This is the paper I wrote when I was your age. I kept it for 44 years as a reminder that dreams don't have expiration dates, and that the people who believe in you matter more than the people who don't." After his speech, an elderly woman approached Steve. It was Mrs. Peterson, now in her 80s and long retired. "Steve, I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "I was wrong about you. I let your speech impediment blind me to your potential, and I tried to limit your dreams when I should have been encouraging them." Steve looked at his former teacher with compassion rather than anger. "Mrs. Peterson, you don't need to apologize. You taught me something valuable too, that I couldn't let other people's limitations become my limitations." "Your father was right about you," Mrs. Peterson said. "He saw something in you that I couldn't see. My father saw me the way parents should see their children, not for what they struggle with, but for what they could become." Today, Steve Harvey is one of the most successful television personalities in the world, hosting multiple shows and reaching millions of viewers every day. But he credits his success, not just to his own determination, but to a father who believed in an 11-year-old stuttering boy's impossible dream. Jesse Harvey passed away in 2000, but not before seeing his son become exactly what he had predicted. Steve keeps that faded 6th grade assignment in his office, framed next to a photo of him and his father. It serves as a daily reminder that parents who believe in their children's dreams, no matter how impossible they seem, can literally change the world. "My father taught me that the most important voice in a child's life shouldn't be the voice that tells them what they can't do," Steve often says. "It should be the voice that tells them what they might become if they refuse to give up on themselves." If this incredible story of a father's faith overcoming a teacher's doubt moved you, please subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with a parent who believes in their child's dreams, or a child who needs to know that their biggest obstacles might become their greatest strengths. Have you ever had someone believe in you when everyone else doubted? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to ring that notification bell for more amazing stories about the power of belief and the courage to chase impossible dreams.